Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor.
The Daily Compliance News for December 19, 2022, the Qatar threatens the EU addition. And we begin with that story from the Wall Street Journal, as Qatar has threatened the EU to either slow down or cut off energy supplies if they continue to investigate the allegations of bribery by Qatar as to certain EU parliamentary members. So Qatar's taking it up a notch. Now it's to the EU to respond. Next up, from Forbes, the United Kingdom has taken a stance against corruption and other crimes as UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly announced sanctions against several individual and entities involved in corruption, conflict-related sexual violence, and human rights abuses. The sanctions include an asset freeze and travel ban. Of course, these come out of the various wars that are currently ongoing. Next up, Washington State Supreme Court has blocked Albertson's special dividend. And this is just a fascinating case in corporate governance. It's just as great an example as you can find of private equity saddling a company with debt and taking the money out because they borrowed millions to billions to allow the company to pay $4 billion to shareholders. So why would you borrow money to pay money to shareholders? Well, that's a very good question. But the reality is private equity wants to take the money out before the merger, and the Washington Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. And our final story comes to us from the New York Times, as Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF, is expected to agree to extradition to the U.S. The FTX founder, now in prison in Bahamas, faces criminal charges and is expected to agree to extradition in the U.S. In the U.S., he's been charged with using customers' FTX deposits to make lavish real estate purchases, invest in other companies, and donate money to politicians. In court on Tuesday, he said he wouldn't waive his right, but after a few days in prison, he's inclined now to go ahead with the extradition request. So looks like SBF is coming home to pay the piper and listen to the music for all his fraud and billions that have evaporated and disappeared from both FTX and Alameda Trading. So welcome home, SBF.
The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.